In diversity there is strength and resilience and flavor and everything we want.
I've done vineyards and fruit blocks and all sorts of stuff. So and vertical farming, I've done all sorts of things over my career, but I like agroforestry the best. Because of the way it introduces biodiversity back into fields, which is missing. You know, we have a biodiversity crisis in this country. You know, birds that I remember from my youth no longer exist on the fields, and there's just nothing for them. They're just deserts, and I just putting that back into the landscape is just, I think, fantastic. And you definitely see it in terms of the wildlife and the birds that are coming back. I've worked before on other farms in Suffolk that have fields which are 30, 40 hectares in size, really big fields. We're big for Suffolk. And the wildlife will live in the outside 50 metres of the field near the hedge. And the middle of the field is like a desert. There's nothing there. And I love the idea of actually putting rows of trees in so that you spread the wildlife, spread the biodiversity all across the field and don't just have it in one corner. It would have been very easy just to put all the trees on the far side and make the field square. But I think it's much more effective to actually have it all the way across.
We are interested, of course, in food productivity, but also in a much wider range of measures. So we are very interested, for example, in how much carbon you're sequestering, how much biodiversity improvement you can make, what the species of unusual birds and things.
We advise start with the pioneer species for shelter, creating organic matter, restoring of biodiversity. It's enough to do for the first winter. You also can notice around the biggest trees still are pioneer species. Most of them we planted, like the white willow, Salix alba, like the poplar, like the birch. They are great trees. They give shelter, they produce organic matter, they feed insects, also have nice pollen in spring for the bumblebees and solitary bees. And so we have a landscape with diversity, which is fun for nature, having mosaic systems. Massive external input, polluting a lot, destroying biodiversity, and having only a few products which they get badly paid for. That's modern farming. And the first things go to the birds, since they are hungry and thirsty in our empty landscapes. But if they become more, then also the weasel, the fox, the owls, the hawk will put a glass ceiling on their population. And since we selected varieties with good crops and enough production, this will grow above the glass ceiling, what we have seen happening here. Because of this, a food forest needs to have enough size to attract enough predators in the system.
We have lots of surveys done of how it is now. Birds, and we have some rare species of birds that are generally in decline, that at Wakelins are increasing, so we're very happy about that. So we have quite a lot of information about the current situation, but we don't have information about what it was like in 1992, okay? So we don't have longitudinal studies, but we have my neighbour. So you can stand in my field and you can see hares and badgers and foxes and deers and doves and owls and everything. And you can stand in his field, nothing, zero. So that's the comparison. The comparison is not necessarily with 1992, the comparison is with the next door neighbour.
Because we have been doing it for so long, have quite a good rotation and are so diverse. There's no monocrop. There is, it's either intersown with or undersown with green manures, mustard. There's flower banks, there's beetle banks. There's the apple trees in the middle as well. So there's no monocultures, and it's very diverse in everything. And that's what makes a healthy crop. If you have a healthy crop, you will have a lot less disease. Last year we had leaks. We had a big problem with the leek miner. They grew through it, which I didn't know, but yes, I would have lost a lot of those leeks. But you're not having just leeks, so you got your potatoes, your carrots, so you can't have 100% for everything.
The simplest illustration of how the agroforestry supports that is with wind-borne diseases. A few years ago they had a year where they had potatoes on this farm in 3 of the north-south alleys. The neighbour had potatoes in his huge field, but it was a very bad year for potato blight, which is an airborne pathogen. What happened was that at Wakelins the wind mostly comes from the west, southwest. The most westerly alley, the potato blight was bad. The easterly alley of the 3, not much potato blight, because the spores didn't get through the trees. Our neighbour, whole field was gone. The worst place to grow apple trees is in an orchard, because everyone is close to its neighbour, and if one of them gets a disease, they all get a disease. The best place to grow an apple tree is in a wood, a forest, because then it's on its own, and as long as it's close enough to its neighbours to be pollinated, then you don't have the disease spread. So here, this is like planting apple trees in a wood, because each one is a long way from its brothers and sisters, and so we have the maximum diversity. It also gives us a good long season, lots of variety of tastes, good resilience to disease, because different ones do well in different years. So for example, 2 years ago in this area in East Anglia, apple farmers had a really good year. Last year they had a bad year, and this year they have a good year. We have had a good year each year because different varieties of apples have done better in different years for us. So the diversity gives you resilience.
They started selecting to purify crops in the late 1800s, mid 1800s. Then 1900 they hybridize, and then so really from 1900 onwards we have pure monocultures. That's how I kind of view it. So modern spelt is just a modern variety. So that word ancient I don't like. So I think the word heritage to me means something. It means diversity. So that's the word I always push. And some people are growing pure fields of old wheats, like there's red lammas or blue cone. These wheats, you can probably buy that now in the UK. And they're old, and there's probably a little bit of diversity there, but they're still monocultures. So, but you know my definition. My definition is genetic diversity. In diversity there is strength and resilience and flavor and everything we want. And if we narrow the crops too much, we know where it's going to end up. Be screwed.
When we first planted this, I thought, oh, it's going to be, we're not going to see a benefit for, there'll be years before we see a benefit. And what was the real surprise was that the benefit was instant, almost. That same year, they weren't even out of the tree guards. There were just rows of tree guards. But by leaving these strips, you get loads of beetles. First of all, the first thing we noticed. Second thing we noticed was loads of small rodents, mice, voles, things like this. And as soon as they appear, then you get all the raptors overhead, owls, hawks. And that was in the first year. That was even before we had a tree. It's really amazing, the difference. The best project I've done in my life in agriculture, yeah.